He gained fame like no one else did. His work sold for unimaginable amounts, but somewhere down the line, though M.F. Husain remained as maqbool as ever, not everyone was fida. And that, in the end, was the story of arguably India's greatest and most well-known artist who could not return to his homeland. Conflicting ideas and ideologies have thrived in India for centuries, and the country's ability to manage diversity has been its greatest asset. But what value is art if it does not provoke, stimulate and trigger a debate? That's what we discuss in Prime Debate today. 13 years ago, hardline Hindus attacked Husain for his paintings of nude Hindu goddesses. In 2006, he apologized for a painting in which he represented India as a nude goddess. Hindu nationalists accused him of defiling their religion. Often referred at as Picasso of India, M.F. Husain was one of those artists who brought Indian art to the global arena. It was due to him that people all over the world started acknowledging and respecting the value of India's art. Husain distanced himself from traditional painting styles and became a symbol of Indian talent abroad. His works were more celebrated internationally in recent years, as controversy over some nude paintings made him unpopular in his own country. Husain came under attack by right-wing activists who took umbrage at some of his paintings and accused him of hurting sentiments of people with his portraits of Hindu deities. The rumblings began in the 1990s and escalated in 2006. The campaign against him was political, led by people who had no knowledge of Indian traditions and culture. Although he apologized and clarified on various occasions, it did not satisfy his detractors who hounded him and kept up vehement protests. Cases piled up against him in courts all over India. The final straw was the vandalizing of his galleries and attacks on his home in Mumbai. M.F. Husain spent the last 5 years of his life in a self-imposed exile. After a long disputed controversy over paintings dating from the 1970s, they were considered by many anti-Hindu. The paintings depicted nude representations of Hindu goddesses Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati and Bharat Mata. And the need to mourn an artist's death springs from the need to remember his special contribution to his country's, even to the world's cultural history. In this sphere, there is much to recall with M.F. Husain's passing. And to discuss this issue, we have with us in our studios, Divan Mana, Chairperson, Chandigarh Lalit Kala Academy. He's also an artist. Neelam Man Singh, theatre person. Rana Nayyar, Head of English Department, Punjab University. And Seema Bhalla, the Scholar of Art History. Well, Divan Mana, if I do begin with you, what makes M.F. Husain so special?
See, number one, he was an extremely gifted artist who began, as you all know, by painting hoardings, but he was also good at many other things like making films, making documentaries. He was a towering personality, very handsome person, and very agile, very creative, with a lot of energy, enthusiasm, love for his country, love for India's traditions, India's history, India's civilization, and proud of that. And apart from all these qualities which are a prerequisite for any artist, but he was extremely gifted and extremely aware of the situations around him.
Neelam, he's been referred to as the Picasso of India. What would you have to say to that?
Well, I think when you compare an artist who's great in terms of his own context with an international artist who's also very eminent, somewhere you trivialize the greatness of Picasso as well as Husain. I think Husain was extraordinary, he was innovative, he was an original, he was highly imaginative. So I think that kind of person becomes a lodestone for his own work. He doesn't need to be juxtaposed against another artist to underscore his eminence.
So how would you actually define, what would you say? What is M.F. Husain?
M.F. Husain is undoubtedly one of our very brilliant artists. I think his life sparkled with the same brilliance as his work. He never separated art from life, as if life was here and art was somewhere else. He managed to dovetail the two in a manner which was so creative and so exciting that you actually admired his life as much as his work.
Right. Professor Nayyar, he was controversial. Why do you think he was always so attracted to controversy?
Because of the kind of man he was.
Do you think he was
If I have to
misunderstood?
describe him in one word, I would call him a maverick, an iconoclast. And such people, because they stand alone, so they are misunderstood. And it's not that he was chasing controversies, I think controversies were chasing him. I mean, Diwan just mentioned, you know, he did all kinds of things. On one hand, he's painting Durga. On the other hand, he's disrobing some of the Indian goddesses. On one hand, he seems to be challenging tradition. On the other hand, he seems to be conforming to the tradition, you know, eulogizing someone who's a popular figure, someone who's a political figure. So I think, but he was much beyond these narrow boundaries. I think that's what I would like to say. And no artist can actually be fitted into slots, which is what we try and do. We say that he's like this or he's like that, because let us remember one simple thing, that all artists grow in the process of doing whatever they do. And as they grow, they kind of break the molds, they break the boundaries. So they become indefinable in a way.
Right.
And probably that's
Seema, you know,
why they're
art
misunderstood.
is a business. One feels that if you don't get the media attention, you are not what you are. You're not what you are worth.
If others don't see what you're doing, it is getting so much narrowed into your little space that you are just kind of, it is between you and your work and the few little people around that your work is getting its
It's
kind
reaching
of
out
reach.
to
Yeah.
fewer people. Yes.
So media in that way it helps, because you, at the end of the day, you do want to reach out your work to a wider audience, and media helps in that. And definitely, as far as the business is concerned, I really don't know how much would you call it business, how much will you not call it business, because to survive you need to have money also. It could be any form of art. If it is a painting, you need to have a canvas, you need to have paints, you need to have brushes, you might need to have your studio, and all that requires money. If it's a theatre, it's a full team that is working, and each one is there. I mean, they all need to have the little money. So I really don't know how far can we say it is business. Of course, you do need money to run your little creative process that you are into. But I would not call it really that way business.
You know, this is a very complicated question, and there are no clean answers to it. There is no such thing as a quid pro quo, that the artist needs media attention and the media needs the artist because it needs to write. You know, it's
I've
not,
just put it as
it's not as
yes, I understand.
It's not like that. I think when an artist creates, to quote Henry Miller, he wears the robe of a priest, because the act of creation is very private, it's very silent, it's really between me and my work.
Yeah.
The painter with his paints, the writer with his paper and computer, and the director with his actors.
Yeah.
It is only later that other elements enter.
Right. I agree.
That is not the starting point. That is not even the process. Process and production are quite separate from the public aspect or dimension.
You know, because a lot of artists cannot keep up with that public fame, you know, to keep up with that, and because artists just...
I mean, we all know Raza is extraordinary.
Yes.
True.
It's not that Raza is in the news. You don't catch a news
So
item
it's
about
at the end of the day, it's
introvert.
personality.
But if you take the personality of the artist Husain, who we are discussing,
Yes.
he had a flamboyance about him.
Yeah.
He was constantly
Simply
reinventing himself. He
possibly.
was like that.
Yeah.
For example, you know, I remember going to an exhibition of his in Calcutta, which was just white pieces of cloth and newspaper, torn newspaper on the floor, and I was quite surprised. But it was making a statement.
Right, right.
You know, everything that you do makes a statement. It was a silent protest against what we would call the marketing of an artist.
Okay.
So I think It's a complicated question.
Yeah, also
But
after
just, sorry,
yes.
I'm going to go in for a short break, but just before a break, Divanji, Husain was a very expensive artist. What makes him so expensive? Why was he so...
See, again, see, number one, he was very much rooted in the Indian tradition, because the way, like when you're talking about Picasso, see, Picasso never repeated himself. He was always, as she said, reinventing himself.
Right,
he was alert to the situations, the changing times. At that time, all the philosophers, thinkers, artists, they were all kind of there in Paris, and Paris was the hub of that kind of, and Paris was in a way like kind of, directing the entire world art scene, or leading the entire world art scene, even in terms of thinking also. But Picasso did not get stuck into that groove.
Yeah.
He kept on changing according, because that time of the century, there were a lot of things happening in the world. So at a very quick succession. Similarly, Husain, India after independence, or before independence, India was also changing very fast. And somebody as knowledgeable as Husain had to be there. There must be other people who are as knowledgeable, but they were not as alert and as creative to be able to translate that into a work of art which was actually representative of the times we live in, or sometimes even ahead of times. That's why. And of course, then he had all those, as she said, he was a maverick, he was a flamboyant person. So everybody knew him. So whatever he did was noticed. He made sure that it did not go unnoticed. And if you are noticed, then of course, like critics, and but you were mentioning earlier that like he brought Indian art scene to the world. I would slightly differ. Husain was primarily responsible for bringing Indian art to the center stage within India.
Okay.
But worldwide, there were other artists. In fact, Husain was primarily popular amongst the Indians, amongst maybe NRIs. There are others like Subodh Gupta, for instance, or Bharti Kher, or Sudarshan Shetty, or Atul Dodia. So these are the other artists who have actually been accepted in the world, like except for Sousa. Sousa was a part of some collections in Europe. But most of the Indian huge icons, be it Raza, Husain, Sousa, Krishan Khanna, Taib Mehta, they were not really part of big collections in the world. It is only recently, barring one or two odd examples. So they popularized things within the country, which was very, very extremely important for a country like ours, because which has a rich artistic tradition, but it was totally neglected after the British, because they did a lot of damage to our self-esteem. They actually killed our traditions, our folk crafts, other art forms as well. So these people were responsible, and they responded to that call.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take a very short break, but we are going to be back to discuss the larger-than-life Husain.